are up, I'll just let everybody know that Carter, my son, was named the Sports Illustrated's Kid Magazine of the Year. And we'll be traveling to San Francisco tomorrow for the awards ceremony with all of these athletic elites. And we're supposed to be meeting with Steph Curry and the like. He was named Sports Illustrated's Person of the Year.
Oh, wow.
Congratulations. Congratulations, man. That's something. That's a blessing, man, within itself.
It is. It is.
How old is he, Eddie?
He's 11.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow. So I think they do this every year for kids 6 to 15, if I'm not mistaken.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah. Well, you know, great things happen when we have well, you know, Carter is in a very special position because he has two daddies. So that goes to the word saying the importance that dads bring to kids' life. You know, he has both dads that I know personally. I know both of them personally, and we always, you know, we talk about that, and it's a strong testament to saying the inspiring part that kids do when they have those kind of role models and fathers to encourage them and support them and be there all the way. So salute to Carter and his achievement. And now let's get down to business for the night. Gentlemen, welcome to Fatherhood Talks. I want to welcome people in the audience, people who are there in the back, the people who are on the screen, people behind the screen, people who are watching out there. Please remember, like, share, subscribe to us. Go back and look at some of the old videos. Look for topics that you may be facing within yourself and within your family as a father. And see what happens in these, what you call them, Lionel? Think tanks. Go and look and see what happens in these think tanks when we bring these topics to the forefront. I'm Ron Osborne Williams. I'm a father. And I want to definitely let the rest of the team introduce themselves tonight as we begin to talk about the topic of generational curses, generational trauma. And that should take us into a lot of places. And if you look at the picture that advertised tonight, it showed a father trying to intervene in those types of curses and traumas. And we're gonna probably share some light on that tonight and share some of our own experiences and things of that nature. So, gentlemen, go ahead and jump in, introduce yourself for the night, your children, and then let's get into this topic.
All right, Brother Johnny Gaspar, father of two, and excited to discuss this topic that I think is very important and impacts our community in substantial ways.
J. Rob Menard, father of two young adults.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Lionel Lightborn. I'm the father to a tribe of 7 young adults, 4 young men, 3 young women, and 1 granddaughter.
Evening, gentlemen. My name is Ed Tinney. I am a father of 6, 3 biologicals, 3 stepchildren, and 1 grandchild who is growing by leaps and bounds.
Frederick Adams, father of 3, 1 grandson.
Good evening, gentlemen. Donald Jones, divorcing father of 2, a female teenager and a 11-year-old preteen.
Good evening, everybody. Father of 5, Yonel Mondemab.
All right, I think that's everybody. I'm sure we might have some other people come in. As you can see, we have guys on the screen, and we also have the people in the audience who are there. So don't be startled if you see none of our mouths moving, and then you see somebody, some voices. We have this live Zoom going on as we present this to you, simulating what we kind of do on tomorrow when we have our private fathers only Zoom meeting for Fatherhood Talks. So let's get this party shaking. And first, I just want to say thank you to Couponing with Landy. Oh, Couponing with Landy. She said she's going to share the video with some male counterparts. Please do share it so they can see it, and maybe they can even join us tomorrow. All right, so gentlemen, generational curses, generational trauma. How are you guys? What are you defining that? What does that look like? How does it sound? I mean, well, how do you kind of define it? When you hear that, I hear people saying all the time, I got to get away from generational curses and those things. And so I love to hear fathers kind of talk about what did this look like to them and how they kind of define it.
You know what? I read this topic when you sent the topic, and I read it. I was, just all kind of thoughts was going through my mind personally. But then I would like those be focused on the words in general. So when you're talking about generational curses versus generational trauma, I think the misnomer and the misinformation is on the curses part, because it's something so supernatural rather than abstract, that we don't really understand what the concept or the consciousness of that is. First of all, in order to have you got to first have the authority to impose a generational curse. And notice you say generational curse. And so that's not just cursing one individual that's born, that's cursing every individual that's born in a particular era. And so that's a misnomer. That's number one. It's a fallacy. That's number two. It's a stereotype. That's number three. And more importantly, it's a fairy tale. Even biblically speaking, and I'm talking about biblically speaking because I think if you're going to study something that's supernatural, because you're saying generational curses, and curses are, in fact, it's a supernatural topic, something that we will have no control over. And so when you're talking about the supernatural authority being God Himself, then you have to go back to scripture that actually will have to justify what is a generational curse, if it exists at all. And so I can give some example of when some misnomers that when one of the best example is Cain and Abel, right? You would think, now I think Cain was cursed, correct? But this is the best part and the most brilliant part of Cain being cursed. Enoch wasn't. And Enoch is Cain's son. And if you know Enoch, for the people who don't know Enoch, Cain would be like the worst in the Bible in the Old Testament, and Enoch is actually the best. So here it is. How could the worst give birth to the best? Enoch is the guy that God actually took. He never saw death. God actually took him up. You understand? So, and to find out that Enoch was actually Cain's son was just mind-blowing for me. And so it makes me look at generational curses a lot differently, and made me have to really research a little bit more to say, hold on, where did that even come from? Because you couldn't really find that in the Bible or no scripture. And even when you're talking about, if you want to attribute that to the children of Israel, when they was in the desert for 40 years for being disobedient to the very promise that they had in the promised land, then that would not be classified as a curse neither, because for the simple fact, it was more, and God said it was more of a chastisement than a curse. God is not cursing people for their disobedience, but He will chastise you for it. Because the Bible said, who thou lovest, thou will chastise, not curse. So I think that for our own biasness, even our own spiritual and sometimes biblical biasness, we will try to use situations to exalt ourselves and our situations above other people, especially people we don't like. And so we would go ahead and frame it in the fact other people's disobedience as a curse and their consequences for their disobedience as a curse, as opposed to when it comes to our consequences, I'm just going through. And so, I mean, there's so much to talk and unfold and peel back the onions on this particular topic, but I'm just getting started.
Hey,
Y'all, go ahead, G, because I'm about.
He was about to let it go. He had to block himself out. Yeah, well, with generational, see, and I agree with Lightborn. It's not generational curse, it's generational learned behavior. And what happens is that oftentimes we learn the behavior of the person who we consider to be a mentor. And we take that information and sometimes we just never change it, whether being good or bad. We just carry it on to the next group of people, which is our kids or kids that we're caring for, and pass that same on behavior on to them, not realizing that a lot of times we carry on some trauma too. So when you start talking about generational trauma and generational learned behavior, so to speak, not generational curses. So when you start thinking about those things, you start thinking about that.
Hear me clearly?
Say it again.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. So you start thinking about that learned behavior, which we pass on. So sometimes even when we're dealing with our parenting skills and we're passing on those same things that we learned from our parents onto our kids. So if we've never learned to praise and all we got was bombardment of negativity from our parents, we often pass on that negativity without even realizing it. And so instead of praising our kids, we'll start telling them everything that they're doing wrong and passing on that for the next generation. I think that pitch that you have is so powerful, with that father shielding his son, which then in turn allows him to be a better father to his child because he's able to block off that negativity. And so once you start looking at how we're managing our traumas, our generational learned behaviors, and if we're changing them for a more positive outcome, then that's when we start to break those generational habits and start to be more productive within our families, within our relationships, even within our friendships, and become better people.
I would agree with a learned behavior assessment, because when I look at my dad, there are three positive things I can think of that I tried to emulate. One is that he married a woman, I think, that was above his level. Two, he stayed with that woman. Three, he never abandoned his kids. He was there. He was always there. Those are the things that I positively try to emulate. The things that I tried to stay away from: one, he was an alcoholic, and that was kind of difficult in my teen years to deal with. Two, he was just not an engaging father. What I mean is, I don't recall like pearly words of wisdom coming from my dad at all. He was there. He was a provider. He emulated how to fix stuff around the house and all that kind of stuff, but he just wasn't quite engaging. And where I felt, I don't think that was a traumatic thing for me, but it was a negative that I did not want to emulate as I became my own family man. So I chose not to be ever drunk around my kids. So I'll have an occasional drink, but I never ever, I don't think I can ever remember being drunk. And I am, if anything, over engaged with my kids, because I want my kids to know that their father was intentional in his input, whether they liked the wisdom that I was trying to espouse or not. I was intentional in making sure that I was engaged with them. So I agree with the learned behavior assessment because I learned how to emulate the positive and reject the negative.
Well, I definitely agree about the learned behavior. And Lightburn, I was about to jump down your throat about the curses thing, but you're right. It's not curses, it's more so consequences, generational consequences. So I'll give you that, Lightburn. I'm gonna take my initial reaction to that. You know how they say you got to take a breath before you react. You know, the Bible said we quick to listen, slow to speak. You know what I'm saying? So I thank God for that reference. But yes, generational consequences. Much like the learned behavior mindset, actions of the previous generation has the, the ability to impact the future generations substantially. Not just when we talk about, people talk about slavery and how that still impacts us as Black people today, from the separation of families and the mindset of Black men being Rolling Stones, because slavery caused that, created that emotional disconnect that allowed them to be able to, okay, I have a family here, but they just took my children and my wife or took me to someplace else and told me to breed this other lady on another plantation. So sadly, that was something that we constantly saw, the disruption of the Black family. And unfortunately, our experiences in our neighborhoods as we grew up with the various racial issues that many of our communities faced created even more of that. Growing up in the Caribbean, the one thing that I experienced, unfortunately, is fathers being able to have children with many women in their community and it be okay. That was something that happened in my life as far as my father. What's so crazy, he learned it from his dad. So when I vowed to, as Eddie talked about, being different and not repeating that same behavior, because my dad also was not engaged. I would go to baseball games and all those things, and my mom would show up, even though she was an EMT working on the ambulance. She would pull up to the games and sit there. I can tell you how many times my dad showed up to a game, and it was a Saturday, so he ain't working. He had no reason not to be there. He just never showed up because that wasn't his thing. But you need cleats. I'm gonna get you the money. You can go get the cleats. You need your glove. He gonna give me the top of the line stuff. But be present, that wasn't his thing. And I vowed, much like Eddie, to be engaging, to be involved, because it changes how your children think and their mindset about seeing a man love on them and wanting to be there for them all the time. That mindset of being a protector comes even more in because dad is present. I didn't see my dad as the protector. I did see him as a financial provider, but I didn't see him necessarily as a protector because he wasn't that engaging, involved father, if that makes sense. But I wanted to be different, so I chose a different route. But unfortunately, what I do see a lot of times, especially when children are younger, because my former wife, her mom was extreme in reference to her behavior with her father. Ron laughing. And as a result, led to behavior by her. And I say this to you guys because one of the things that I learned when I'm with my daughter, I had my daughter go through so much therapy because of behavior that was from her mom, her grandma, her great grandma, that continued to the point where everyone had a child before they were 16 or 17 years old, including her mom. And her goal, this was her goal, to graduate high school and college without having a baby. Because every auntie, every cousin, every female that was in their generation all had children before they were 17, 16 years old. That was her goal. So now here I am involved, and I'm like, oh, you not about to have no no kid, if there's anything, I'm gonna do about it. And the constant engagement and involvement, even to the point where the sexual conversations I would have with my daughter was so, her mom would be like, you talking to her like she your friend? I said, I gotta talk to her like that. Because if I don't talk to her like that, you know who talking to her like that? Them people who are her age. And you know what? That's the blind leading the blind. So I'm going to let her know that, yeah, it may feel good, but everything that feels good to you ain't necessarily good for you. And these are the consequences to it. And I think those things made a change. But the trauma of things that will happen to you as a child that you experience from your parents tend to, and it may not impact you immediately, and you may be able to become this very successful, educated individual, but there are things that are going to happen in your life, and we know life is what it's going to be, that's going to trigger that behavior because that's what you saw. And we tend to repeat what we see, not necessarily what we've been told. And I think that's the big part of generational trauma. No matter how much you've been told not to do something, if that is what you see, whether it be infidelity, whether it be violence as far as domestic violence in the home, all of those things, whether it be verbal or physical violence, whether it be involvement or lack of involvement, that's what you see. So you tend to repeat it unless there is something that comes in and interjects, whether that be another family member, a male or female, somebody that comes in and changes the trajectory of your life, or says, go sit on somebody's couch to deal with the drama before you deal with other people and create issues with them. And I think that's the biggest part we have in our community.
You know,
And I'm glad you said that. I'm sorry, Ron.
No, I just wanted to. I know Johnny made reference that I was laughing, but when I was listening to him, and I think that this is what really makes this conversation that we're having important, and for other people to hear that the terminology that Johnny used is his former wife, right? And we don't understand the power that words have. You know, we can sit here and say we're fatherhood talks, we're here, you know, this and that. And the words we would use would denote what we're about. And I just wanted to point that out because when I heard it, first thing I thought about it is he used the word, and the way he used the word to let it know that, yes, she's not my wife anymore, but there's no hard feelings and I don't have any animosity. And you don't have to have animosity because we moved on and we're still here to raise these children together the best we can. And I just got to put that in. Listen, so if you're watching, go ahead and lock in, subscribe, so you can get some more of this. The positivity is probably the most important part because you're not normally getting to see fathers at this level of you know, are even in the new lens that, you know, the mainstream have got many fathers in. So I just wanted to point that out, Johnny, because that's so important to what we've been doing, even though it's not about the conversation we're having, but just the context of how we're having our conversation is really important. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna bring you back into this, Ron, anyway, because another thing that Johnny said that I thought was important to point out was the fact that he took the time to get his daughter counseling. Because oftentimes we're talking about the surface trauma that we can recognize, right? And I wanted you to speak to a little about the trauma that we don't recognize that still affects us and creates it shapes our personality in a way, and we just don't understand what it is that's doing it and the importance of receiving that counseling in order to recognize those traumas.
You know, it's funny you say that because I had supervision this weekend with other clinicians, and one of the conversations was about a female therapist, Black female therapist who has had 3 different occasions. She wanted to find out, what do I do about these young men and their mothers coming to therapy and the boys not wanting to be in therapy, feeling like they're not, like, and the mom is adamant that they need to be in therapy. And I think that this goes very good into our conversation, because sometimes we have to recognize what our role is in this generational curse to not make it traumatic. We can't just push it off. And I'm gonna, just like I'm glad you resorted to the picture. The picture has the father shielding the children from, not from somebody else, but from ourselves. And that's the part so the quick suggestion I gave to it is stop having therapy with the son, have therapy with them. Because this is where the issue is. The mom has anxiety, the son has anxiety, and it may be not being able to communicate because they also missing the other part of the triangle. That could be the elephant in the room that you don't know the reason why they want to come to therapy, why they don't want to come to therapy, why they can't communicate. So we have to look at this bigger when we're looking at identifying trauma, especially in inbred trauma, because inbred trauma is what we do to ourselves, and then we sometimes pretend like that's not why it happened. It's like, oh well, you are you are fast and promiscuous because not because I held you tightly on the grip, when that is the reason why, because the person challenged what happened. And if we don't acknowledge our role in what happens and where our kids are and what happens to them, then we're just switch swapping the trauma. We switch swapping this over as like, oh, I fixed it, but we didn't fix it because you just tried to do what I call the Oedipus Rex syndrome. You tried to change what you knew was the destiny. But sometimes if you would have not did anything, maybe the person would have had enough sense to say, like many young people we see, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a teen parent. But if you try to stop them from being a teen parent, if you doing everything you can and not letting them enjoy their real life, they more likely gonna end up a teen parent. Because
I agree with you on that, Rob, because that was my thing. Like initially, I remember when she was younger, I wanted to have the conversation because I think she was like, I remember the first time she came to me talking about sex, like they were talking about humping and grinding in class. I think she might have been 10 or 11. So that's when I had that first conversation, very graphic, and her mama standing there looking like with her mouth open, like, you didn't just say that to our child. I like, yeah, because she's about to be exposed to it with her friends and all of these things. So I need to have that conversation. And then as she got older, like Ron said, I didn't put that clamp down. No, you're not going there. No, you're not going to this party. No, you're not going there. It was always, you can go. I just want you to understand how to react, how to behave, what are things that can happen to you if you choose this type of behavior. So I want you to be, thinking about it in reference to how you move and what you do, because these are things that can happen as a result thereof. And because of my willingness to allow her to just enjoy life and not have that clamp so that she doesn't end up a young teenage mama, it allowed her to be able to see the consequences herself and make that decision for herself about why she won't be it based upon her behavior. And I think that's what led to her being able to get to a college graduate and now working in DC and still ain't got no baby. Thank you, Jesus. Along with my suggestion that she go and make sure we get all of these things that they do at the hospital to prevent having kids. Because I ain't out here being stupid now. You know what I mean? I know she 20-something years old. I remember when I was 20-something years old, what I was doing, especially when I was single. So I'm gonna be real with it. And whatever I can do to ensure that her choices are beneficial to her, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna be a support. Like we talk, man. Listen, y'all would be surprised the conversation I be having with my daughter. But it's necessary for her to be free to come and be able to talk to me when those issues happen without me having to be that dad that's like, no, I don't want to hear that. Because we continue with the trauma and the generational issues when us as fathers and men aren't willing to be that sounding board for our children, whether they're boys or girls.
Johnny, you put that in such a eloquent term, because is listening to what you were just saying is like, we have to build this bond with our kids and not be authoritarian. You know, not that we
Complete authoritarian, not
yeah,
complete. You gotta
right.
have some level of that so that they
No,
recognize who you are.
I'm not saying, I'm saying the balanced one now. I'm saying that they understand that we're not a tyrant.
Okay, there you go.
We're someone that they can have that conversation with, or that they're not going to have the conversation with us, but we have that conversation with them. You know, I always admire, you know, again, some parents are very proactive when it comes to this, giving their kids condoms and saying, hey, use this, and the kid get embarrassed and what have you. But that's a very good proactive way to say, oh, mom, I'm not doing that. Dad, I'm not doing that. But if you are, I'm saying you don't got to do it. But if you are, here's what you need to be using. And that was really prevalent when I was a youth, because we had HIV and AIDS. That was really, really a big issue in our community. So that was probably more important to protect against than even getting pregnant. You know, I think when I was a kid, people didn't think about if you were gonna get pregnant. You thought about, oh, if you get HIV and AIDS when I was young, when a young guy. You know,
like you got, you know how they say you got that vid now? You got that HIV. I like that HIV. What? So those are the things that people would say back then. And I do agree with you, Ron. That was the mindset back then, and it still to some degree is now. But I think as parents, we understand that when you are still a child and you bring a child into the world with so many things that you're still trying to accomplish, the difficulty of overcoming those things. Not that you can't. My brother Lightburn is a perfect example of still overcoming, no matter how young you have your children. But I know he could tell a story of the difficulty of it compared to somebody who has a child later on when they're more in a more financial, more mature, a better mental place of how to raise a child. So those are things that I'm grateful that I'm able to have that conversation with. And that's why I'm glad to come here, because everybody has different experiences and I'll get to learn on each and every one of your experiences. So I just hope more people log on and hear about, you know, how we can stop the generational trauma from moving forward.
And Ron, you guys got to forgive me from coming from this biblical perspective, and the reason I'm coming from that biblical perspective tonight is because so many spiritual minded people, they suffer the most from this. As a matter of fact, when we talk about generational curses, I'm like, number one, it's not a generational curse. At best, it's a generational crisis. And even if it's a generational crisis, it's caused by generational competency, right? And rightfully so, because each generation is supposed to know more than the last, and particularly being African American. And so if that be it, you understand? And when you got some of the most biggest bodies, you understand, of teaching and learning going on in the churches, and then that stuff is misinformed, you understand? Then everybody's so much instilling consequences of what you just said, Ron, being authoritarian. Nobody's really looking for the number one, the consensus, and then the competency of what's being said. And so when we talk about that, I mean, even the Bible says, my people suffer for the lack of knowledge. You understand? And so you got to understand, let's get to the core and the science of what may be called in the crises. And then sometimes it's just simple competency that just wasn't even learned. And if you didn't learn, you damn sure couldn't pass it on. But when you learn it, which is what you did, Gaspar, you learned it and you passed it on. And now she can pass it on to her children, but it can't be an individual thing. It has to be a collective thing. And then, and a holistic cultural thing. And so I think, yeah, we are privileged because we haven't experienced it. So we're not going to be off the hook because we're smarter. We just haven't had it harder. And so don't attribute your being smarter to having it harder. No, you didn't. And so the lack of competency, our parents paid for that. They just wasn't ignorant by happenstance. They was ignorant by circumstance. And so you don't get off the hook. You owe them to make your children, well, you owe them first to be smarter yourself and to make our children smarter. I'm just gonna stop there because I need to hear from my fatherhood champion, Larry Jordan.
I don't know if you can even hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay. I think when you start talking about generational trauma and generational curses, I think curses is actually, I think it's the wrong word. And I tell you what I mean by that. When you say curses, what you're talking about is words that are empowering to fail. So when you curse anything, what you're doing is empowering it to fail. That's why I tell my children, they may use profanity, but you don't know how to curse, okay? Because actually Jesus cursed, you know, and when people say, no, did he use profanity? You can call it what you want to, but he empowered certain things to fail. When he went to that fig tree and said, you're not gonna grow no more, I'm empowering you to fail. You will not be producing anymore. So I think that curse is the wrong word. I agree with all you gentlemen in terms of I know with my kids, what I try to do is I said I'm going to support you, but what I am not going to do is I am not going to empower you in your when you make a bad decision. Okay, that is, if my daughter chose to have a child, of course I'm going to support that child. But you know what? You won't be going to them parties. You're gonna be taking care of that baby. That's your baby. You're gonna be doing those things that you're supposed to do because now you're faced with the consequences of your actions. Okay, and that's very important, and they need to know that because what they want to do, what kids do, they will try to turn things around on you. And I said, oh, if it wasn't for you, then I would have been. No, you made a bad decision. You had to pay the price. I used to tell my son when he was growing up as a very young man, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, I said, son, you know, the worst thing that you want to do is that you want to become, you don't want to become a young man without skills. Okay, you need a skill. And with a child. Okay. And the reason for that is because, and guess what? That's exactly what he did. And now he wants to improve himself. And I said, I'll support you in that endeavor, you know, but what I am not going to do when I offered to pay for it for you and you chose not to do that, this time I won't be paying for it for you. You will be paying for it yourself. Now you have to work twice as hard to get to where you want to go, but that's part of your learning process. And those things, I think that my kids understand that. They say, and that's why they don't talk to me about stuff though. When stuff comes up though, they say, "No, I don't want to talk to him." Yeah, let me talk to mom, you know. But because I said I'm going to do certain things, and I'm gonna support you 100 all the time, you know, until they put me in the ground. But what I'm not going to do is support your bad behavior. Let me put it that way.
You know, Larry, what you said, and I was going to comment on this. Generational curse is used as a scapegoat to not try. We often say, you know, people often say, you know, it's generational curses, man. And it allows us, like you said, it allows us to put ourselves in a position that if we fail, we're like, well, I was going to fail anyway, so I didn't put as much effort into it. And so when we use generational curse, it takes us away from being, what's the word? Problem solvers. It takes us away from being problem solvers and allow us to sit in what we want to dwell in. And so, you know, we have to understand that it's not really a curse, it's just an obstacle. Something that we have to figure out how to overcome. Now, when you start talking about trauma, we have to learn to overcome those traumas, and we have to get ourselves in coping mechanisms in order to overcome those traumas, so we can understand, because there's like I was saying before, there's a lot of trauma that's underlying that we didn't even realize we're dealing with, and it's coming out in different ways. And then when we sit back and start thinking, man, why do I act like this? It's because of something else that happened to you, whether it's a positive behavior or negative behavior. Something was a precursor to that even becoming a part of your personality, a part of your life. You see what I'm saying? And so instead of looking at stuff, like we said, as a curse, so it allows you to be complacent or complicit in what you're doing, you have to start looking at things as obstacles. And I start looking at how do you overcome? How do you figure this out? I'm realizing and I'm gonna talk about the generation of the generation of kids that are coming out now. They don't have that drive to look at obstacles and try to overcome them. I think we're in that. We have kids that are coming up now that are in that, if I can't do it, or if I think it's going to be a little bit hard, I don't even want to try it. And so we have to start teaching this generation of kids to overcome obstacles and putting a little bit of, allowing them to have a little bit of difficulty in front of them to start trying to figure out how to overcome these obstacles that they're going through. And it's one thing to shield them from the trauma, but it's also another thing to shield them from experience and not confuse the two. And when we're trying to rear our kids and bring them up.
So
You know,
Ron,
something that I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Tina, because I mean, I wanted to shoot back at Larry, Martin Luther Lawrence over there. Man, I got to give props. That was a very powerful statement you made. You said curses is just words that empower people to fail. I don't even know where that came from, but it had to be divine, man. That just blessed me. I ain't even got nothing to even talk about on the subject no more. You closed the door on that one for me, but that was a blessing to me, man. So sorry about that, Tina. Go ahead.
no, this is a question to Ron. What when I grew up, seeing the negative effects of my dad's not engaging, seeing the negative effects of the alcoholism. What is it that happens, I guess, psychologically, that when an individual who grows up seeing those negative effects seem to repeat that, and it's almost as if they have no, I don't know, recourse other than to repeat the negativity that they grew up with? What psychologically happens? You're muted.
You're muted, Ron.
I'm sorry, I didn't know I was muted. Gene spoke about this earlier in our conversation. Learn behaviors. And that's why it is so, like, to have two parents, to have four parents, and four grandparents. Everything that child begins to learn, they then process in their brain what they want and what they don't want, what they want to take on, what they don't want to take on. So a lot of times we'll see an example of long-term seeing 3 generations of a parent being alcoholics, right? This child will say, I've seen what's happened to my great-granddaddy, my granddaddy, and my daddy. I'm going to not do this consciously because of the experience of it. But they may still go to the bar and drink because it is still some of the learned behavior that they have. So it is really a battle within our own self a lot of times to know what challenges are there and what paths to go down. I think about for myself to avoid becoming a teenage parent and a drug abuser, because those were the 2 things that could have happened to me. Now, I did good until I did good with never, using drugs or alcohol or never any of those things. And it was very clear because I continued to have real live models to remind me of, is that what I want to do? Now I could have made a choice to say, hey, this is the family curse, so I'm just gonna go out here and wow. Or I could say, I don't want that, I don't have to do it, and I'm going to have to take some ownership. And this is a part where we've seen this a lot when we're seeing fathers and sons being programming in the past, where sons are able to even show fathers where they've missed some of their mark and help them understand their own father. You know, so this is it is not sometimes, and I say it is not as simple as just saying, hey, we can estimate that a person will have all these things, because at the same moment I could have said, man, I'm about to go drink my uncle. Matter of fact, when they went and got the skeezer and they were smoking up all the dope, I could have said, I want to do this too. But I didn't. I was a kid, but I could have. It's something allowed me to say, I don't want to do it because I seen how it was a set for them. But at the same moment, and it's very hard to say what's the tipping point for someone to go to that. Like we say people have this tipping point. What is the tipping point that makes them decide that, hey, I'm going to do this or not do it? It's hard to say. And if we had that, you know, if I had it, I'd be a millionaire. But I mean, I'd be a zillionaire, because that's the key thing to know why people would do what they want to do. But we do know that this key thing of learned behaviors and having an example to have interventions and other examples. That's why communities sometimes do so bad, because we have took out all in a large majority of our sometimes our impoverished communities that didn't used to be impoverished. They used to be a Black community. We took out all the other role models that kids could learn behaviors from, and we only left the people who had what we in many instances consider negative behaviors. And guess what happens? We say, wow, all the kids got negative behaviors. And why do everybody want to be the negative behavior? Because those negative behaviors this is a strange dynamic that is drenched in the culture. I hear this word all the time about the culture, especially in hip hop today, the culture. The culture is there, not in Bel Air. If you live in Bel Air, you ain't in the culture. And the kids in Bel Air want to be in the culture. So they doing the culture stuff when the culture was initially us having these communities, but so many of the diversity of models moved out of the community and left only a few models for the kids who were left there. And that's not bad just on the kids left in the communities, also for the kids who moved out, because they're always searching to be part of this culture. Go ahead.
But I thought I had another thought, because here's another direction to go in, where when you may not have generational curses, but all of us have experienced informational curses.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is your daddy went to jail, so you don't go to jail. And you understand? And so what they do is put your parents' circumstances on you, good, bad, or indifference. Your daddy had it as a teenage father, so you're going to be a teenage father. And so that informational curses, which is back to Lauren's point, is I think all of us cross culture suffers from it. And which you almost like a communication caste system. You know what a caste system is, right? Mm-hmm. If you were born into a certain culture, you're doomed to die in that particular culture, in that circumstance. So if you're born economically poor, you're doomed to die economically poor. You're just stuck in that particular that caste system that you were born in, which by the grace of God in America and a lot of evolving countries, and not even evolving countries, even third world countries, because I'm starting to see people who was born poor in third world countries become billionaires. And so to think that you can actually, as a human being or another human being or another guilty human being, right, try to impose a circumstance or some type of information on somebody else. As a matter of fact, let the truth be told, if we gathered or did a poll or gathered the science or whatever they call it when you gather information and do a study on something, then most of the people who received informational curses, right, actually became more successful because of the informational curse. Mm-hmm. Which means somebody said you couldn't do something and you use it as a drive to do it.
Right.
And so that's why I think we're a lot of victims of informational curses, but never generational curses.
Yeah. And I think
that also, I think that also we're a victim of normalcy, you know. And to go back to what Tenny was saying, is once you create an environment of normalcy, whether it's with negative behavior, then everyone around there, like Ron is saying, once you start forming that community of that negative behavior, everyone's going to fall into it because it's what I see, it's what I grew up in. It's what I know because everybody around me is doing the same thing and no one's trying to do anything different. And so that's when we start creating those toxic, traumatic environments. And so that then begins that generational trauma that's going to continue. And so what we have to do is we have to pull ourselves, you know, there are very few people who will look at the environment that they're in and say, you know what, this isn't right. I don't want, this is not what I want for myself. And to just pull on what Lightborn was saying, those are those people that are going to say, you know what, because you're saying I'm destined to be this way, I'm going to prove that I'm not. Mm-hmm. And they pull themselves out of it and they start to work to be the exception to the rule. And so what we have to do is we have to stop creating these toxic environments and make the normalcy the more positive environments, and start making these singular people the exception and the ones that made it out, and make it normal to do what they're doing, and look at the people who aren't striving as the weird ones, so to speak.
The problem with, and I hear what you just said, Gene, and that would be the ideal situation that we will all desire. The issue that you have is who is going to go back in the communities to make the exception the normal. And that's a problem. And I say it's a problem where that's where we come in the various organizations we're in, and who we are as men. How do we reach back to those communities to make changes in them? Because you got to show your face. You got to be present for them to see something different. Whether you're there helping out at the local elementary school in the community, because all these communities got an elementary school in them. Whether you're there showing up to do reading with the principal, or you giving out something in the neighborhood, and you just showing yourself present. That's the only way these things are going to change, because a lot of these children have never seen a positive Black role model. So if they've never seen that, again, we do what we see, not necessarily what we've been told. And if we're going to make that change that you're talking about, Gene, we have to be willing to go back into these communities and do something in them for people in there to see that this could be not necessarily an exception, but can be the rule.
Well, I think a great example of that is what we do here, and how this went from a program to deal with dads who got problems.
Gotcha.
It went from dads, oh, we got to fix these dads who got problems, instead of just saying all dads got problems. And let's get all of them. Let's get the super successful dads. Let's get the rich dad. Let's get the poor dad, and let's put all these dads in the room and put some normacy on being a father. And what will happen is, in this environment, you have this rub off effect where the dad who may be on one end of the spectrum rubs off on the dad on the completely other end of the spectrum, because we begin to normalize our experiences as dads and as fathers, with not forgetting about our class, our stations, our wealth, our poverty. We start forgetting about that, because the core part of who we are, if we don't have anything, is being that father to our children. We could listen, animal kingdom, our counterparts, the mammals, we need to start learning more from them. Some people watch the little animal shows, the Animal Channel, when they don't got nothing to do. We need to start focusing more, studying them and what they do, and pay very close attention for us to start revisiting how we operate within our family, our tribes, and our cultures, and our cliques, because we are doing some things that's unnatural to us. I think we're becoming unnatural. And when that happens, it's hard to get back to the base that we need to get to. And this is
Ron, you're on a tightrope right there, because when you start looking at the animal kingdom, generally you will normally have the female part of the species the group dealing the children. You look at the animal when it comes to lions. You don't see them hang the cubs hanging around with daddy. Mama taking care of the cub and she hunting. She doing everything. So when you start thinking about that, and it's weird how people will take that and say, oh, well, that's sexist in reference to what he's talking about going back to the animal kingdom, because oftentimes you have the man of the male of the animal, the group, doing what he want to do, having children with all these different types of female animals in the group. But it comes back to us again. The difference is oftentimes how is we different than them? So I hear what you're saying, Ron, but I'm saying at the same time, we got to be different than them from that perspective. Because one of the things that
I think that's a great, that's how people will begin to, because I'm not talking about what their roles are. I'm talking about what they do together as the pride. Because you can be sure somebody come around, okay, even the moms are going to protect the dad.
Gotcha.
They're not letting it, if dad it was too tight for him, they ain't just taking care of the kids. They also show up, the three of them, and tear down the hyenas. You know, so it's looking at not so much their gender, their roles, but how they operate as the family.
Now we're talking about dad got 3 wives and 4 wives.
Well, here's the thing. If you want to equate that to what's going on now, you do have people who have multiple.
No, we're not going there. We're not going there.
I'm just not multiple wives, not multiple wives. I'm saying you have people in a situation where they have multiple mothers to kids, right?
Multiple families.
And they need to learn how to be cohesive in the way they interact.
Okay.
And so
if you go with that,
yeah. So if you're gonna learn that, because they do form a community and they all get along and they all learn how to cooperate for the best of the kids.
Okay.
And so you can always learn that part. Now I'm not saying go out and start having multiple.
No, but Gene, you said something that's so important.
But if you're already there
for the kids, Gene said something that's so important. Both of all these parents are doing one thing to sustain their legacy and their kids. They're not thinking selfishly about themselves. They're thinking, if we fail, we no longer exist. If we fail, we no longer exist, because if kids gone, we no longer exist. We extinct. People be saying, they used to have these over here. There's only one left in the world, and he's 86. And since he had nobody to mate with, he's out of here. So it's I know people will want to take and pick and choose, but look at the core part of this is what we're talking about as fathers is, what is this whole pride doing for these kids? And are they being selfish? Or are they being collaborative and working as a community to make sure they have a legacy?
Now, I love you said that, because now we get to just cast guilt on the whole culture.
Go ahead, Mr. Collective, working together.
We're getting ready, because now we can bring this together. We get there, and this is what we as a culture, the whole culture, I'm talking about from top to bottom, from the most affluent to the most absolute.
Yes.
Where we'll get what we can learn from animals is because they understand the equity in territory, right? And so what you just explained, right, is the cure for gentrification. But if you didn't know the value, you understand, of your territory, because that's what animals do, all of them. They protect their territory because they know the value of their territory. And that's culture, unfortunately, across the board. I don't care who you are and how smart you think you are, because if you Black, you represent and you look exactly like your culture, never not your circumstances. And so that's why you can always get called out, because they're not blaming you for you, they're blaming you for the conditions of your people. And so if you think you're different, you're not. And so until we understand and value the equity of our territory, we can sit here and play all day long, but you're just a cul-de-sac minded person. when you can be consumed with owning your country. But we're set aside for cul-de-sacs. And so back to that point, just in case any of us was thinking grandiose, because we okay and others are not. But that's just me. Let me get off my soapbox.
No. Listen. It is so. Listen. Let me say this. And if people listen at this point, if you haven't hit the button to like, subscribe to, listen. It's amazing, and I say that as a content person who does a lot of content. It's not very often you hear someone raise their voice like that and talk in the tone with the passion that is for positivity and to heal us as people. Most of the time when I hear people in content talking like this, it's to tear us down, to separate us, to have us thinking completely opposite of what we really need to be doing. And so I'm saying that this is what fathers' roles are. We come to this think tank to say, how do we organize this? How do we put this together so people can see that there is not what this image of us are doing as fathers, but this is what real fathers are doing.
Listen, he said a cul-de-sac mentality because we haven't been protecting our territory. I didn't even think of it that way till when he said our territory includes our children and where we're from. That's our territory. So if we have the mindset to protect our territory as a whole and not just thinking about me, because the territory generally is us as a people. Right. I think that's what Lionel was saying. We are a people because, like he said, no matter where you are financially or successfully in your life, when something happens, listen, you could be the only Black person at the Fortune 500 meeting, right? Some crazy happened in the Black community, they're gonna look at you. So Johnny, what do you think? Right. No idea what they were thinking over there. That doesn't do it me. I'm so far removed from that mindset because financially and economically, I have no connection to that. But as you just said, though, we are connected to the culture because of our skin color. It doesn't matter if you have no idea if you grew up Mr. Nerd or not. They are still going to expect and look at you as a person connected. So that's why it's essential for us to protect our territory. So I get you on that, Lionel. And it comes back to that being able to, though. How are we able to if we have generationally impacted our family and not taught them what it means to be able to protect our community? If we've shown them the opposite, like I said, we do what we see, not what we've been told. We could tell our kids all day, do not put your hand by that socket, do not touch the fire, do not do none of that stuff. And they see us go up to it, they see us do, but they don't know we know what to do to not be burned or not be shot. They don't. And then they get shocked, they get burnt, and then they turn around and look at us like we left them hanging. No, as my grandmama used to say, who don't listen will feel.
But Johnny, we did. I think that we talked about this before. You did leave them hanging because only thing we did, we told them not to do it. We didn't explain why, and we didn't. And then when we did, and this is where the trauma comes. This generation trauma. When we did do what we did, we didn't let them understand. We treated them like they were they were unintelligent because we didn't explain to them why we did it the way we did it, what happened. And now they have a better empathy of the situation, and they don't go out and then say, "So my mom was out here doing this, tricking and all this other stuff." But listen, there was a reason for everything that happened. But if you hide it, you don't get to be able to open it up for why this happened, why dad wasn't in the house, why we never seen, why we never got it. There's a reason. Correct. We just said he wasn't in the house, and then I don't ever tell you why I wasn't there. Well, I wasn't there because we couldn't afford to all stay in the house. Okay. And I would rather for y'all to have somewhere to stay than for me for us not all to have something. See how that little thing what goes from a trauma, a generational curse trauma, to an exception.
Correct. Right.
It changes automatically to a strength that I had enough sacrifice to give up being and living with my family So they would have someone to stay because they didn't want men there. Or they couldn't, a man couldn't stay, especially not no black man who might have came and did something wrong, quote unquote.
I hear you on that, man. One of the things that Lionel said earlier when he talked about the people in the church, the spiritual things that are caught up on these curses thing, that I thought was very enlightening, and that I've experienced myself. One of the things that I often talk to people, young people now, before when they're getting married, and they said that we're going to go do counseling. So they all say, I'm going to go do counseling with the church. And I said, well, that's great. That's great. But I also tell you to go sit down with a marriage counselor, somebody who does this for a living. Because you can get counseling in the spiritual, and you need to get counseling in the natural. And I think every person at the church who's involved with the counselor should always recommend this, because they often don't talk about the things that are natural, because as Ron just said, we try to hide it. In the church, we don't talk about, well, let me ask you, have you ever seen a marriage? Have you ever seen a successful marriage? If you've never seen it, how do you know what to expect or what to do or what you should expect to go through if you've never seen it? Where's your dad? Do you have a relationship with him? Where's your mom? Do you have a relationship with her? How was their relationship? These are things that if you ask these questions, I'm sure a lot of dudes will be like, okay, I might not want to marry her. Or the other way around, when he starts to answer about, nah, I ain't know my mama. She left us when we was kids, and she rolled out and left my daddy and left us and got another family. So as a therapist, my job now, I think, Ron, would be like, so let me ask you, young brother, have you ever, dealt with the emotions of that? Have you ever gone and sat on somebody's couch and really have you been able to reconnect with mom? What does that make you feel? Because those are things that will make you run out on your wife.
Yeah.
We don't think about that, but because you know who we relate her to? That woman who left us. Unless, as Eddie mentioned before, you have somebody that comes in and interjects in your life to show you something different. Let's say there was another lady that came in and raised you as her own, or there was an auntie or another female that showed you the kind of love that you needed. But if you never had that, the women that may come into your life will be disposable. They will be women who you expect to leave because that's been your experience. And that's why I come back all to say that at the end of the day, when we are looking to get married, and I share that you guys, all of us here are pretty much married. I know Donald has strongly and with power said he's a divorcing dad, but I pray one day that he'll get the opportunity to remarry a woman that understands who he is as a man and able to love him the right way. But he makes sure that he chooses a woman that understands what it means to be a wife. Because if you've never, again, these are things that you get through counseling, not just spending time. Because as you all know, we will love on them in all kind of ways, but the emotion of it never comes to the surface of things until things happen. And the difference between Larry's generation and Eddie's generation and our generation today, and those even younger, is that they're in a quick fix mindset, and there's so much divorce today that to them that's more natural than seeing 65 years and 54 years and 70 years of being married. That's the experience these children are getting today. So I think we just need to play a role as fathers in here in recommending our children work through it and learn about each other emotionally, not just in what the physical that we see, so we can avoid these generational traumas.
And you said that's. Go ahead, Ron.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Ron. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you said something very powerful, and I think the thing about that is this generation is not taking the time to learn the people that they're with. They're and until you learn the person that you're with, you're never gonna get it. You have people who are dating 5-6 years and still are only on the surface of the person that they're with. And when they get married, it just snowballs for them. And like you're saying, they're not receiving that in-depth talk to say, hey, what was going on with this person in the past. And a lot of times you can still have that person who steps in, like Gaspar was saying, still have the abandonment issues because you're figuring out, why wasn't I good enough that my mom didn't stay or my dad didn't stay? And so you're still dealing with those abandonment issues. And no matter who steps in, you're still going to have that feeling of a hole that just can't be fixed until you figure that piece out. And so you're still bringing that trauma into that relationship. So, it's not, you hear us talking tonight, but this is something that is not one size fits all.
Right. It's funny that we have transformed ourselves from beginning this to the idea of talking about marriage and people getting together, because one of the main thrusts of these transgenerational traumas and traumas come from these unions. Mm-hmm. They don't come from not having the unions; they come from the unions. And when we have these unions, and those things happen when in the unions and all that occur, one of the first things that we see is, like, as you were saying, Johnny, how people begin to ask them about that. You know what people don't ask new couples, and I ask them all the time, they don't ask them about is how they really got together. See, most new couples got together through attraction. Attraction equals sex. Most ministers not going to talk about sex, not in the way that I talk about sex. Now I talk about what's your plan if you find out that she's not satisfied by you. Never been. Ooh. What is it? Because you feel like everything is good because you say, "Oh, I'm done, baby." What's happening? And are you willing to even have a conversation to even believe that you are not satisfied? See, these little things that somebody's not going to ask them because they are so taboo. These are taboo things, but these are the core crux of most of these people getting together.
Or ending up going their separate ways eventually.
Right. Or how they end up getting separated. So it's a great. Let me as we got a little bit. I want to be able to ask the guys down. I know they're not on camera, but they're in the audience. If some questions or anything that they want to say, because I know they've been here, they've been listening. They may have a question or something they wanted to be able to say, and I want to give them opportunity. If you guys have any question, anything, or just even a comment, guys who are down in the audience.
Hey, this is Donald. The way the conversation is going is actually excellent because there's a whole lot of gems that everybody had dropped. Especially Mr. Jordan, everybody, just the whole panel. There are not any curses. You have to be mentally strong enough to want change in your life in order to do something different. And it does take a toll on a person to actually be that one to actually walk away from the crowd and say, you know what, I just can't do exactly what y'all doing because it's not for me. But it takes a mental strength and a mental fortitude to actually be able to say, I have to do something different because I want change. And I'm landing on that one.
But it's funny you say that, Don, because it brought us back to, I think, when Lionel initially started about his disagreement with curses. And I think Larry defined it for us very clear that when you really look at what a curse is, it's exactly it. I put something on you that you believe and you respond because I said it to you. You won't never do right. Nothing come good to you till you do right by me. Listen, if I don't believe that ain't gonna work on me. Because guess what? I'm gonna keep on doing whatever I'm doing and never gonna acknowledge it. But if I start to believe that, and things that should go wrong and things that don't happen in your life just don't happen, then you start saying, oh, this is because of that. Instead of saying some things happen and I'm gonna keep moving. And the people begin to buy into that idea. And then they also become complacent in saying everything that goes wrong now is not my fault, it's the curse. And I don't know how to get rid of it. That's a very scary position for people to be in, and for, but again, that's cultures who believe, because we have a strong culture who may not believe any of that. But I know that that word generational curse is very big in our culture right now. Very big in our, I mean, everybody said, oh, I'm trying to break the generational curses. How about you just trying to maybe do a better understanding of why your family's results ended the way they did? Because you're not gonna, a lot of times we saying we're breaking the curses and we doing worse curses. If you get my drift, we saying we're breaking them, but we doing worse. Instead of trying to understand, let me research why this happened, and then I can understand and I can explain to my children what things they should be thinking about, instead of me pushing on them, don't do this and don't do that. Because once I say don't do something, the key word don't say do. Don't do this, it means, oh, this is something that you want me to do. So let me challenge myself and do it.
And
Hey,
I'm
Coach,
jumping on
go ahead.
Go ahead, Donald. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, and I apologize, Coach. I'm glad that you said that because it brought me to a memory of mine. I used to sit up under my grandparents all the time and ask a lot of questions. And the reason why I used to sit up under my grandparents and ask a lot of questions, because I really wanted to know exactly what was going on. And I didn't get it back when I was a child, but a lot of those questions that I asked and the conversations that I had that I wasn't able to have with my parents helped me to become a better adult, and actually helped me have a better mindset on how to be more stronger in everything that I do. Because the one thing that my grandparents instilled in me was, first off, you have to be 10 toes down on everything you do and you say. And everything you do and you say, you have to remember you represent this family with your last name. So are you going to do different, or are you going to do the same? And I chose to do different, and I'm glad I had the conversation.
I hear that.
All right, anybody else down in, as they call it, in the goulash, as they call it on some platforms, the goulash? Have anything? If not, let's do a quick round robin, guys. Last thoughts about transgenerational curses and traumas.
Well, I'm gonna jump on what Don said real fast, because I completely agree with that. And oftentimes, you know, when your kids ask questions, we're trying to shut them down. And one thing that his parents didn't do was shut him down. There's a difference. And a lot of times you have adults saying, get out of a grown folks' business, right? When you're asking certain questions. But there's a difference in putting kids in grown folks' business and explaining to them the situation that they're in. There's two different things. And you can't squash a child's exploration and understanding of what's going on in their environment and shield them. There's a way you explain it. There's a way you talk to them and help them grow within there so they can be better off than they were when they first came into the situation. That's one thing I always tell parents. Another thing is, I just want to piggyback off something that Gaspar said, talking to those, have you ever seen someone in a positive relationship? I also think that people should also talk to when you're getting in relationships, talk to people who separated. Ask them why they got separated. Talk to both halves, because I guarantee the reason why the man left is not the same reason why the woman thinks he left, and it's or vice versa. And so you have to talk to both sides, because you got to understand that sometimes what breaks up a relationship is the thing that should have kept them together, and the lack of. And so you have to start understanding the different dynamics within relationships. And I just want to stop right there.
All right.
Lionel?
I ain't gonna force Lionel to say something.
No. I was sitting here thinking about, then back to Donald's point. We have to stop. We have to do a better job at changing the narrative when it comes to the assets of our culture, projecting the assets and not the deficits. When we say things like, oh, the whole group you were bad was, with were bad, when that was not true. The whole group you was with was not bad. You understand? It was a lot of people in that group that actually championed your change or you wanting to change. And they pushed you in that direction. And a lot of times their voices and perspective get let out. I couldn't say that, not for me. The group didn't want me to fail. My group of friends didn't want me to fail. I have to question anybody who said their group of friends wanted them to fail. Because that's not really an indictment on your friend, that's an indictment on you. If more than one person wanted you to fail in that group, something seems to be wrong with you. You understand? Not because everybody had bad in common. I'm like, no, something about you may be bad that I wouldn't find out until I get to know you. You understand? To find out why you would cast a bad, you understand, perspective on a whole group of people where you from, who you're more friends with than you are with me. You're just getting to know me. And so it says a lot about a person that, and I think I have to always challenge our characters culturally that says, oh, yeah, you got to get from around these group of people. I'm like, hold on, what kind of group of people you was around? You understand? Because there's no way in the world you could be around a group of people and the majority of them don't care about you. And so sometimes I think that's a misnomer, and the narrative is always skewed in our favor because we're trying to impress somebody we don't know and end up portraying the people we do. And so I think we need to fix that narrative and say, okay, no, one person in that group may have not wanted me to exceed it, but the majority of the group did. And they may have not included me in certain things and bad behaviors simply because they wanted to see me succeed. So we got to stop buying into the TV narrative when it comes to our culture and start facing the reality.
That is so real, man. What he just said, because I remember
I
growing.
just want to say,
Go ahead, LJ. Go ahead.
I just want to say one more thing, and like I told my son, you know, if you want, especially in today's society, if you want to find out anything about your mate, there's 3 things you should do. Number 1, say, let me have your phone. If she is willing to share her phone, she'll be willing to share anything with you. Number 2, let me go into your bedroom. Because if you go into a bedroom and it's all crazy, that's what's going on in her mind. Her mind is disorganized, just like her bedroom is. And this goes male and female. I'm not just talking about male. And the 3rd thing, check her credit score. Because her credit score will tell you the rest about it. She's going to tell you all her habits, what she does, everything else. And you'll know everything you need to know. And she'll know everything about you if you did the same, so y'all will know if you get along. I'm going to leave that alone.
I thank you, LJ, for your keen wisdom and insight on those 3 things.
There's gonna be a lot of people who are getting second dates once you answer that phone.
Listen, but he ain't lying about that phone though. That phone is for real. What I thought he was gonna say though, I thought check out her Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I thought that's what you're gonna say. But no, but on a real, one of the things that Lionel said about the group of people, and I'll bring it back to generational trauma. I remember growing up in the islands, and I'll be playing ball at the recreational area, and we all would sit down and play dominoes or whatever. And you know, in the islands, I won't say unfortunately, in the islands, smoking was something that everybody pretty much did. But I was like, let's say I'm 13, 14, I'm into sports, involved in every kind of sports. And I'm sitting at the domino table with all these older men, and they're passing around a joint. And they would get to me and they're like, skip him. And I remember them intentionally saying, skip him. And I was like, I used to be like, well, why y'all skip me? He said, no, because this ain't for you. We got better things for you. You got better things to accomplish. And you don't need this in your system. This gonna just distract you and not get you focused. And when they explained that to me, it was very interesting because I didn't see them as those types of dudes that would be necessarily concerned about my welfare per se, but they were, because I was the young one in the group and they saw me doing good things with school and sports and different things of that nature. And they just saw this as a potential roadblock that I may run into. So you're right, Lionel. The majority of people around you don't necessarily want to see you fail. It may be 1 or 2 that are more so jealous of your accomplishments. And because of that, they desire to see you get knocked down a block. They don't even want you to fail. They just want to get you knocked down a block. So you got to keep your head level. But coming back to the generational trauma, again, I think if we take our time to pay attention to our family, ask questions, and if we're willing to share, and as fathers now in our times, be willing to guide our kids and be transparent with them, I think it helps allow and end some of this generational trauma that we may have endured unnecessarily because people weren't willing to be transparent with us. And if we are going to be the maker of change, we have to change ourselves. And once we do that, I think it will start to end some of the generational trauma, not just for us, but our family. And because of their exposure to so many more people, they will be able to share that with others and help them and their families end it as well.
Anybody else? Well, if that, hey, it looks like Johnny took us right up to the time. But I do have a couple of just an announcement, an advertisement. I don't have a fancy commercial, but I'm gonna try to make it fancy as much as possible. So the Delta Educational and Life Developmental Foundation and Broward County's alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, in partnership with the Zeta Chi chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated and the Rho Sigma chapter of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, presents the 2022 Men's Mental Health Conference. And I know, guys, this is an opportunity for any fathers out there to really get a quick, and it's amazing because I've seen quite a few conferences for men's health and for men's situations. And then when I went to look and see who the panelists were, there was no men on the panel. I asked somebody, I was like, how you having a men's thing talking about erectile dysfunction? And you don't have a male doctor? You couldn't find one male doctor? I know 3 of them personally in our chapter. So you couldn't find one male doctor, but he said he couldn't find it. So he had a lady who was going to be talking about erectile dysfunction. That's a very interesting conversation to me. But look, the Deltas seem like they know how to do it the right way. This event is on Saturday, December 17th. I think at 10 o'clock. So 10 o'clock, I think it starts at 10 o'clock. You see the luxurious panel of people will be talking about multiple things in reference to men's mental health. I shameless plug, I'll be talking about the coalition between sex and mental health. One of my skill sets. And so I again invite people who are watching this, if you're trying to look at where you can find this, definitely go to my Facebook page. I'm going to also try to put this up on the Fatherhood Talks page so you can find out how to register for it. I'm also going to be trying to put out the actual link to go and register. It's a Zoom registration, so I'll be trying to put that together. After I come from the meeting, we have a meeting about this conference. I want to suggest some things on how to get some more men on here because it's very difficult. And I say this also in describing how we kind of get people to come on here. It's hard to get fathers and get men to come on things. We make it difficult for them to get attached to it. Sometimes, we don't have a whole registration. Once you hit the link, you hear. That's what I'm about. I ain't even trying to get you to put codes in. Just hit the link and you come on in the Fatherhood Talks. Because if you got to do all that other stuff, you're going to get distracted and not come. So I want to make it easy to put men like to just push a button, like the remote control football game come on, they hit the button and the game come right on. They don't do a whole bunch of other stuff to get it on. So again, that's an advertising for that. Again, I want to thank every father tonight for the input, just for being in the room. I think we had a very, very, very informative conversation and really kind of broke down and dismissed some of these misnomers about what is generational curses, how they transgenerationally are passed down, and kind of looking at centering it back onto the importance things that we can do, because what's the power of a transgenerational curse? Generational curse is the idea that we break it through recognizing what happened to us and saying that we're going to make the best of this. We've given lemons, we make lemonade. Giving lime, we make limeade. We giving apples, we make apple juice.
I thought you was gonna say Appleade. I don't know why I thought you was gonna say.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna say Appleade. I know that sounds like old Jesse Jackson type of thing, but I ain't gonna do that. We apple juice. So hey, I want to thank everybody. We'll see you here again. Any fathers? Again, we have our private father meeting tomorrow night, starting at 6:30 on the Zoom. Look, you'll get correspondence. You can go right to the comment section of this actual session and see the link. Hit on that link and come on and join us tomorrow night. We'll be talking. Because we'll be talking about the topic for tomorrow night. Based on this, the educational topic is family history. So family history, what will be kind of centered around based on this topic tonight. And we'll see you all then again next week. One thing I say this all the time, as we always get ready to end, it's so powerful when we get ready to do this chant, because most shows just say, "Oh, okay, bye." But that's it. But I think that this positive affirmation that we give each other as we have had this time together, and no matter what has occurred in the conversation and debate, we're going to leave here all on the same page as fathers, saying that I am
I am.
A man of honor.
I am
a man of honor.
I am a man of courage.
I am a man of courage.
I say I am
I
a man of respect.
am a man of respect.
Come on, fathers. I say that I am.
I am.
I say that you are.
You are.
I say that we are.
We are
Championship
championship fathers. Yes,
Yes,
indeed.
sir.
Listen, y'all see this flex? This ain't the macho man. I have to always let people know this is not the macho man flex. This is us holding our children.
You had to pay attention to that. You had to look at that.
And our families on our back. So when like Atlas, you holding the kids up. Come
Yes,
on,
sir.
kids, we playing. And then the rest of the family's on our back. We're strong fathers holding the family together. And that's what we should be doing. So we thank you for joining us, and we'll all see you again here either tomorrow night or next week. We're out.
All right, gentlemen, y'all have a good night, brother.